Welcome back. Last fall, Governor Cuomo announced $5 million in state funding to start pre-kindergarten programs in 16 high-need districts across New York, including 4 in the North Country. It's been about a month since these students have been walking the halls of Keeseville Elementary.
You know, the first couple days, the lines are a little crooked. You had to get, one kid might take off a little bit.
It is amazing to watch these children, how they have just meshed into the school setting.
Now it's like clockwork. They know exactly what they need to do.
These kids are learning how to be students.
She's just learning the socialization and the skills that she's going to need for kindergarten. It's going to definitely prepare her for next year.
Yes, and they're learning it all through play. So it's not like this is letter of the week and, worksheet after worksheet focusing. They're learning the letters and they're learning the rhymes through playing and dancing and movement.
And sometimes the students don't even realize it's all part of a lesson plan.
The other day we were doing Humpty Dumpty, so we did experiments.
Parents say they're noticing a change in their children.
And we were walking in the hallways and she looks up at me and she goes, "Mommy, I love this school. Can I come back tomorrow?" And that just warms your heart. That's all you want, is for them to be excited and eager to come to school.
The program aims to set up students for success for schooling years to come.
Oh yes, I think it's going to be a great transition for not only for the children but for the teachers also.
The focus we have on making sure students have high goals and that they challenge themselves.
And Kevin Hulbert, the principal at Keeseville Elementary, is with us now. Welcome. It's nice to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So the pre-K program is just getting started at your school.
Yeah, we've had it in place for about a month, I think, right now.
And how has it gone for the first month?
It's been surprisingly really smooth, to be honest with you. I knew that we'd have a great program eventually, but I just wasn't sure as far as the transition, how long it would take for the staff and the students to really acclimate. But it's been really a great process, and it kind of feels like they've been there for years, to be honest with you.
And it's a full day.
It is a full day, yeah. It's a long day, but the kids, we keep them involved. They're doing a lot of hands-on. They have an opportunity to rest near the end of the day, so it's working out really well for them.
And so it's not only in your school in Keeseville, but also at the elementary school in Osceola Forks.
That's right. Osceola Forks has a class, and we have a class as well.
How many students do you have between the two programs?
Well, at Osceola Forks, they have 15 students. In Keeseville, we have 20.
And the parents we talked with seem to think this is a great idea and that it will really help their kids with their social skills and also helping to get them ready to learn when they go to school for kindergarten.
Yeah, the feedback's been great from the parents. First of all, they were excited when they first heard it was opening up. It was going to help them in a lot of ways in terms of preparing their students for kindergarten. But yeah, they are amazed at how much more social the students are already, how much more how articulate they are, and how the experiences they've had, how they've been able to explain what they've been doing in class and so on. So the feedback's been great so far.
And that's important. The days of the students arriving for kindergarten for the first day and just starting there are long gone. Really, the thought among educators is you need to reach them before that point.
That's exactly right. If you can get have them work with the social aspect of their education early on, and then have them become familiar with letters, familiar with numbers, familiar with the routine of the school. Once they're in kindergarten, then you can really move into phonics, phonemic awareness, learning to read, learning to add, subtract. Those are the kinds of things you do in kindergarten now. It's changed, a lot from 20, 30 years ago, and pre-K is really important for that, so that it doesn't, we kind of felt like you have to get, normally before with kindergarten, it would take a month or 2 months to get students used to the routine, and we're hopeful that it won't take as long now that we have the pre-K and we can really start working on the academic pieces earlier. And
the consensus is that that's really important, that if the students don't come to kindergarten and early grades prepared to learn, that it truly does carry on into later years in their life.
Right. It all goes along with this concept of the moment a child is born, and how many vocabulary words do they hear, and how many do they repeat. And the more they hear and the more that are repeated, the better off they're going to be long term. Like, there's a lot of studies that have proven the vocabulary plays a big role in that. So that's an example, just one example of something that the students will be able to develop more before they go into kindergarten. And we do believe, and I think the research has shown that has made a big difference with students long term.
Pre-K programs have been in the area. The city of Plattsburgh and Beekmantown have had them for a number of years, but some of the more rural districts have never had them.
Right, we haven't had them, and I think a lot of the rural districts haven't had them. We were lucky enough to go to Cumberland, head a pre-K program and observe them and emulate some of the things that they do there. Very impressive program that they had over there, so we were really glad they allowed us to come in and visit.
Is the sense that they're desperately needed in rural areas because those areas may not have activities or other programs for preschoolers?
Yeah, I think the grant was definitely trying to hit upon rural areas and then also high needs areas, knowing that pre-K could make a big difference for those families and students long term. That was definitely part of it.
So the All-Sable School District gets about $500,000. Is that just for the first year? Is that for every year? And will that grant money be there, or is that a concern that you could start this for a year or two and that funding could dry up?
Yeah, that money is year-to-year monies that are allocated, but our understanding is that it will be there from year to year. I know our superintendent, who worked really hard to make sure that this happened, did his homework to kind of look into that and make sure the money would still be there from year to year.
The vice chair of the Senate Education Committee has said that he thinks this is something that ought to be in every school district across the state. Do you think that's a good idea?
I definitely do. A lot of times in the news we hear about other countries that their students do better on standardized tests and so on. But one thing you'll notice with some of those countries, for example, Finland, they start off with some form of compulsory education at a really young age to help students. So that is something to think about, to try to help students at the youngest age possible. And obviously you have to think about, taxpayers, and you have to think about how you're using your resources. But, sometimes you have to spend some money in order to save money later on in order to improve things in society, I think.
And if funding is limited for schools, for educators, does this go to the top of the list or close to the top of the list, or do you have many other things that would be competing for that money?
Well, there are always things that are competing. I think there's so many needs that are out there to help kids, but we're committed to this pre-K program. We understand that it's really important. It's going to make a big difference long term. So yeah, I think it's one of the top priorities within our district, and I think it will stay that way.
I know this has been a tough week for students and parents and educators across the nation after the school shooting in Florida. This is a vacation week here in New York. You had your kids, though, for a couple of days at the end of last week, right after the shooting. Are your kids are K through 3?
Actually, my building is K through 6.
K through 6.
Yes.
So did you have some students, some grades where they were certainly aware that this had happened, and how did you deal with that?
We definitely had students that were aware. All the staff members in our building always, kind of pay attention after something like that occurs to see how students are handling things, but to also keep your routine. Don't change things a whole lot. And that's one of the things that we actually tell parents as well. Try to keep a routine. If you can have conversations with your child about these things, and you can be honest with them, but you got to, be careful about exactly how you word things and that kind of thing. But the students, we went on with our normal day, really. And I had some parents that contacted me, had some concerns, just wanted to know, do you guys do drills, and what kinds of things do you do to try to do everything you can to make sure something like this doesn't happen? And I explained to them, our students are very well trained, and there's a lot of drills that we've gone through. But what I really emphasize with them is the belief in that the culture of your school is the most important thing. Do you have a positive culture, which we do, which we work really hard on, and we work really hard to make sure that students that do have some difficulties, or if there's mental illness that is showing itself, or anxiety or things like that, that no students fall through the cracks in our building, that we have things in place to try to make sure that that doesn't happen. And it's hard because you can't guarantee anyone ever that something terrible like that won't happen. I think that would be a mistake to do that, but we want to put everything we can in place to help our children feel safe, to help them understand that we're there for them, to help them make connections with adults. Another thing that helps a lot. And I'm not saying in Parkland or other places where this happened that they didn't have those things in place. I just know that that's what you need to do to really keep that line of communication open. So if people are frustrated or if they're sick or anything like that, that they're willing to try to get help.
And you mentioned the mental health services. Do you have what you need in rural communities? Sometimes I know if resources are limited, it may be more difficult to get those mental health services or to drive students to appointments and things like that. I know here in the area there was a group within the past few years really working to improve the mental health services for students in schools. Is it sufficient, or does it need to be looked at and possibly other things that could be done better?
Well, things have improved a lot. I would say in terms of the resources, the situation, the setup within our region is not perfect. But I will tell you that, for example, in our school, we have a BHSN counselor, a counselor that works within the school building, and a lot of our local schools do ever since the Safe Schools Grant, which I think you were referring to from a number of years ago. That helps a lot, and and those therapists really do help with some students and even families that may have some severe issues they're trying to work through. I mean, I think it's a national issue. I think you're going to find that in a lot of places, but certainly in rural areas, you're not. I think psychiatrists a lot of them are in urban areas and working in those areas. So to convince psychiatrists to want to work here and live in this area, sometimes it's not the easiest sell, I think. But I know that lots of different groups are trying to work on that. I know that the county is working on recruiting psychiatrists and so on. But that's what worries me the most, because if you have a student who's got a significant issue and it's a month, they're on a waiting list for a month or longer to see a psychiatrist, you can get them help in some other areas, but it's that psychiatrist piece that I think can make a big difference. That's what worries me the most.
You joined us. It was 5 years ago this week that we had a community forum here at Mountain Lake PBS after Sandy Hook. And we talked then about that tragedy and what school administrators, or what they hoped would come out of that. In the 5 years since, what changes have happened at your school? Have you seen increases in security and training?
First of all, we've definitely seen an increase in training and professional development as far as all the staff recognizing different symptoms that students might have that would lead to them possibly having an illness that's happening. But on top of that, yes, there's cameras all over our buildings, to be honest with you. We have our entrance is locked entrance with a buzzer system, which almost maybe, I'm not sure, maybe every school in the area has now at this point, which I would probably 10% had that about 5 years ago, and our school district didn't as well.
Security cameras, you have more security cameras. You haven't gone to the step of having metal detectors?
No. I don't think any schools around here have. Yeah, I mean, you're trying to weigh safety with being welcoming with the public and with your parents and with your community. So, but safety has to be the number one concern right now, I would say.
Do you have a school resource officer?
We do not. No, we don't, and our middle high school does not, or I'll say Forks doesn't either.
Is that something you wish you had?
I would like to see that, not for the reasons that some people might think. Some people might think, well, you have a big issue that comes up, you want that resource officer to be there, and I guess that would certainly be something that's helpful, because you could have somebody on campus right away. But I just love like we have our DARE officer who comes in, and in our school, our DARE officer works with our 6th grade. I just love the connections that he makes with the students and how they see him in a positive way.
And when you talk about officers being at schools, of course the question gets raised whether they should be armed or not. And has that been discussed among school districts here or within your school district?
Having officers
either officers and obviously out of Parkland, the topic has come up again about arming and training teachers. Does that come up often as discussion among you and other educators or parents?
I haven't heard that discussion come up too much. It's funny that you say that, though, because there are, even with DARE officers and so on, they usually have a weapon with them, and so people notice that every once in a while, but of course they've been really highly trained in terms of protecting that weapon and when to use it and when not to use it. I'll be honest with you, I couldn't imagine a situation where we're having teachers or administrators or anybody carrying a weapon. I feel like there's too many things that could go wrong with that. And I would really hope that the focus, again, would be on developing a positive school culture as opposed to trying to figure out these things that maybe, I don't know, I almost look at them like Band-Aid approaches, but they're not even that because it could actually be dangerous, you know. Focus on helping students with their mental health, helping families with their mental health, recognizing the symptoms, making sure people are connected with adults, making sure you have a positive school culture. To me, that should be the focus. That should be what we're talking about in this country.
Kevin Hulbert, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us.
Well, thanks for asking me. I really appreciate it.
We reached out to North Country State Senator Betty Little. Her director of communications says the senator hasn't taken a position on arming teachers or the state putting resource officers in every school. Dan McEntee says Senator Little would want to know the cost and where the funding would come from to avoid creating an unfunded mandate for school districts.